What is the ultimate driving experience? Well, a wise man once said, you'll have more fun driving a slow car fast than a fast car slow. And for most of my life, I have certainly subscribed to this statement. But if I embrace the inner child part of myself, I really just want to say 911 GT3 RS. There's just one small problem though. This is me, but this is not a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. This is also me. This is a hat, and this is a 911. So what can we learn from this comparison? Well, people don't let children drive 911s, even once they're 6 feet tall. And my life peaked when I was 7. But what if that didn't have to be the case? What if I told you you could have all those amazing spine-tingling qualities of a car like the 911 GT3 RS for a tiny fraction of the cost? Well, you would most likely say that's bullshit, and you would also most likely be correct. So then what am I on about? How can such a car exist? Well, if you're anything like me, you have a major issue understanding the relationship between time and money. And once you throw time into the garbage, suddenly, building a car from scratch seems like a fantastic idea. Now, despite my formidable craftsmanship, we may still have to temper our expectations a little bit, but nevertheless, let's come up with an imaginary set of criteria for our hypothetical car. Firstly, we must match the power-to-weight ratio of the GT3 RS. This isn't anything crazy by today's standards, but is still probably way more than your average car bro will ever experience. Secondly, it must handle better than the best handling of all the classic crossover SUVs. Thirdly, it must make sound. I want to say F1 sound, but that would almost definitely be setting myself up for a very disappointing failure. But, nevertheless, we will still need sound. So, how are we going to achieve this? Well, if you haven't already met, let me introduce you to the liter bike engine. If your goal is exotic sound on a budget, you really can't beat a 1-liter engine at 14,000 RPM. Well, except maybe a 600, but I'd need 2 of those to meet my... Wait a second, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Well, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, I am already pretty committed to the singular engine concept. And just in case anyone was wondering, yes, you can fit most of an 06 Yamaha R1 when disassembled into the back of and front of and middle of an Audi A4. Alright, now that we have some basic parameters to work around, it's time to turn this hypothetical car into something very slightly less hypothetical. Now, in order to do this, we are going to turn our attention to the world of CAD. And normally I would mean cardboard-aided design, but in this case, I actually mean the computer-aided variety. Now, this was my first time ever delving into the realm of CAD, and it was definitely a steep learning curve at first, but it was immensely helpful in the process. So if you are considering doing so, I would highly recommend. I am using Onshape, which is a fantastic CAD software, so long as you don't mind anybody and everybody having access to your designs. But when you're like me and your designs suck, then that's not such a bad thing. Now, as it stands, we are staring at a very blank canvas, and at this point, I had no idea where to start. And this got me thinking, well, what needs to fit in this said hypothetical car? Well, firstly, I need to fit in it, assuming that I am going to be driving said car. I achieved this with something called photogrammetry. This is kind of like the poor man's 3D scanning. All you need is a camera, your phone will work just fine, and you take a bunch of pictures of yourself, preferably not selfies, those probably wouldn't work very well, and you put them into a program, and bada bing bada boom, you have a crudely drawn picture of yourself, but this time in 3D. Wow. Now this got me thinking, I look awfully lonely in this empty piece of CAD, and I could use a friend if I want this car to seat 2 people. Now if you're like me and have no friends, do not fear. There is a very simple solution. Anything is indeed possible in the wondrous land of computer-aided design. Now, having imported my essence onto the computer, all that's left is to do the same thing with the engine, and we will be ready to start making things happen. This again was done with photogrammetry, which if you are interested in using, there are lots of fantastic tutorials online. Now at last we can commence construction of our vehicle, and we will start with wheels. I decided to start with wheels because I decided to build my car from the suspension up, and suspension is built from the wheels up, so it felt like a good place to start. The wheelbase is based on the width of a Mazda Miata of the oldest NA variety, and this is because I purchased the rear differential and whole subframe assembly, although I will be designing my own suspension, and I would like to use the axles from the Miata without modification, and it felt like just a reasonable width to make the car. The wheelbase is very slightly shorter than the Mazda Miatas, and this is because I simply wanted to keep things short, because short is small and small is light, and if you've done the math on the power to weight ratio and the power of the engine, we need every bit of lightness we can possibly achieve. I would have even perhaps gone very slightly shorter, but I wanted to leave plenty of room between the motorcycle sprocket seen here and the sprocket which will eventually attach to the Mazda differential. This might seem slightly excessive, but I am in a way future-proofing the vehicle and expecting this engine to blow up at some point, in which case I wanted to leave plenty of room for other potential motorcycle engines. Next, we will turn our attention to the front of the car, where I will place an oddly shaped block right in front of my feet, and this block will basically define our front suspension. Speaking of front suspension, here is our front suspension. I will not go into any particular detail on this because, to be quite honest, it most definitely needs a video all on its own, and then probably an entire separate video for the rear suspension once I have designed that. But to summarize what I did, basically, I took a bunch of measurements of my front knuckles, which I also got from a Mazda Miata, and basically changed these inner points of connection until the suspension behaved somewhat desirably, at least to the best of my knowledge. So now you're basically up to speed with the current CAD model. I know it doesn't look particularly like a lot, but if you like, I can make it look more complicated. There is a lot of stuff which I have very much glossed over or not mentioned entirely. Obviously, there's a delay between designing something in my head and putting it on the computer, but there has been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to do with things like engine wiring and other suspension components and possibly dry sump stuff. So hopefully I will be going more into depth very soon in future videos. But I hope this gives you a glimpse of what this project is all about, and I hope you are as excited as I am. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like, and if you did not like the video, feel free to insult me in the comments. Both are great for the algorithm, I think.